Hello friends, welcome back to our UFL learning series, and today's topic is fragment. So let's get into that. So the first thing is the fragment interaction. So what is a fragment? So it's basically a lightweight and reusable component. What does it mean by reusable? So let's think about that. You have one view, UFF view, and there you have one particular content called employee address. So obviously address does have its multiple UI elements. Similar way, you have another view and that also need a same kind of an address component, right? Which also look and feel everything is same like view one. You have a third view, but in this case, this address component you want to display by clicking on a button, okay? And you want to display it as a dialog or kind of a pop-up. But eventually you are showing all three views the same address component. Now, as you know, the principle of dry is don't repeat yourself. So obviously there is no point to create this same component in three different pages. So the kind of a modularization concept we can apply, and this concept is called the fragment. So create a third one is a fragment, and this fragment will contain all the UI elements that you want to render. So that way you can embed over here. You follow the concept of embedding. I'm just embedding this view within this XML view. I can also embed the same fragment within this view one, but in this case we can we're not embedding it, but we're instantiating the fragment, same fragment, once the user clicks on this button. So that's why it's a reusable, lightweight, because fragment is not containing lots of UI elements, but it's a portion of the UI elements which is quite common, and that's why it's lightweight. So obviously by doing this approach, we're reducing lots of development efforts, and it improves the application runtime because it's not killing more resources, but a lightweight small component that being reused in different views. So it improves. Fragment is not a control, unlike view, because whatever the fragment contains, that gets rendered. You have a view element or HTML element, you will not be able to see the fragment is as like a div or span. It will not be rendered that way. So that's why it's not a control, unlike button or maybe a text area or something like that. Fragment consists of controls. It's very important. As I said, the fragment just consists of controls, but fragment itself doesn't have any existence, right? So once it's hooked to the view, and it just shows the controls, not the fragment. But view, on the other hand, is a container of the controls. So if the view doesn't have any UI elements, still view exists, and it's just showing us an empty page or blank page. Next one is fragment doesn't have any dedicated controller, unlike views, because every view follows an MVC pattern, right? We know all that model view controller. So this kind of a concept doesn't applicable. It's not applicable for fragment because it doesn't have any dedicated controller. For the fragment, controllers is optional. It's not mandatory. There can be fragment where you may not need any controller at all, right? So it's kind of an on-demand. But in case you need a fragment controllers, like where you want to write the logic of the fragment's actions or action handle, then you need to borrow. It will borrow the respective view controllers which owns the fragment. For example, in this case, this fragment I'm embedding into this view one. So if I need to have any logic of this fragment dedicatedly to be used, to be written, then that logic I will write to the controller of this view. Okay. Similar, like here, the controller of the view will be used for this fragment, and this applicable to this view as well. So that's the reason fragment doesn't have any strict MVC pattern. It doesn't have a controller because it's optional, as I said. But this is not always true. We'll see all those things in our hands-on session. Let's get into the fragment instantiation process. So instantiation, as I said in my previous slide, the instantiation is not needed when I'm embedding this view to my parent view or XML view, right? Because this instantiation of this fragment will be handled by the UFF framework. But when I'm just want to display it as a pop-up, as a conditional way it should be rendered, then application developer's job is to instantiate this fragment for this particular view. So this is what we are now discussing about the instantiation process. And in this case, we have two approaches. Very important, load fragment, and the other one is called the fragment.load. There is the dot in between. This is what I just wanted to call out the different pointers for two different approaches, kind of a pros and cons. Load fragment is a built-in method for your view controller, right? So you can just have this load fragment just by writing this.load fragment. This method is available because you are using this controller in your view. And that's the reason the by default it points to the view controller. You don't need to explicitly mention for your fragment which will be your controller. By default, it's a view controller because we are using an available method of this controller, view controller. The third one is fragment can be accessed via this.byId. Means like any view elements we can access similar like this.byId. So once we embed the fragment, then fragment elements can also be accessed with the same approach, this.byId. Now, second approach is called Fragment.load, right? So in this case, you need a dependent library called Sap Ui5 Fragment that you need to add it as dependency to your controller. Here is the catch: explicit linkage is required for your dependent view and controller, right? So who will be my dependent view? Because if this is my parent view and I'm just embedding a kind of a child as a fragment, then the life cycle of this particular fragment should be like once the parent is destroyed, this also has to be destroyed. So that's why this add dependency is needed. Otherwise, application developer has to, kind of explicitly mention that. And if we don't do this, what will happen? The parent gets destroyed, but this one is not get destroyed. So it will give you a duplicate ID error if you not handle it too well. It's developer responsibilities. The controller is a catch because the last slide I told like this is not always true, because in this case what I wanted to mean, now I have a provision in this particular fragment load approach to tell who will be my controller. So it's not necessarily my view controllers I need to link to. Any other JavaScript file also I can tell, hey, this is my controller, and it will accept that. The final one is the fragment can't be accessed with the same way that we used to do for the load fragment, like this.byId. This doesn't work for this particular case, and we have to deal with it a different way. Cool. Now the fragment types. Basically, the three types are there: XML, JS, and HTML. Most popular is XML, and I'll be recommending to you, that as well. SAP recommends to use XML because it's statically defined. And JS or JavaScript is primarily for dynamic reason, or maybe the certain context where the XML doesn't support, and in that case JS is a solution, right? But by default I'll recommend XML. As I said, HTML is not much popular, so in our discussion we'll confine our overall focus on this XML and a little bit on the JS. Now coming back to the fragments file naming convention, it's not a convention, it's a must. Like you have to have a fragment as a part of your file name followed by the file type. It can be XML, JS, or HTML. Fragment is a root node, right? So if you have more than one UI element you want it to render, then it's basically it's the root node for that. As a root node, this fragment definition tag is the popular tag that you can use it, but it's not kind of a mandatory. Okay, without fragment definition also you can still render multiple UI elements. We'll see that out. So what next? Obviously the hands-on. Now to save some time, I have already created a Scratch application kind of using Yemen generator, so which I have explained in detail how to create application using Yemen. Video I'll give in the description box. You can check this out later. So let's move on. To run this application locally, I will just put the command npm run start, and this will just open index.html in a static server. And yeah, it's all running in my second monitor. So let's pull this out from here just to show how it looks. It's nothing there, right? It's empty. So now to add certain things, I just want to add a little bit of first name and last name probably. So under the main view of this view folder, this is my content, and let's paste the code, which is very simple code, nothing there, just a label and two input fields. Okay, now the binding you don't need to worry about that, I'll come later. Cool. So what will happen, because it's a live server, it's running, so if I just save this out, I'll be seeing the reflection of my application refreshed, automatically refreshed because I've saved it. Voila, you see the simple first name and last name is showing without any data. So what I'm planning is like, this is my application, and the below I want to create a fragment which will have all the address details as we have explained in the lecture section. So for that, let's create a fragment called address. we know the file naming convention should be the file name dot fragment dot the file type, and the recommendation is always XML. Okay, I am using certain extensions, that's why this auto code is coming up. Let's add the fragment over here. I mean the address details. Again, I want to save some time, no need to type all the things. So let's copy the fragment part, and I'll explain how what is happening there. So basically, I am creating a VBox, and under the VBox, I'm just adding up a simple form, and the form will contain all the different the address elements, UI elements like the house name, street, etc. The moment will I think there is certain errors because it is not, I'm not added any namespace with layout and all. So let's do that also. Otherwise it will not work. Certain syntax error I'll get. So this add to dependent namespace. One is the form and it's the layout. So once I do that, all the errors gone, right? Simple. So let's save this out. What will happen? Nothing will happen because I have just added the fragment. So it started, it's reloaded, but nothing is shown because I have to embed this particular fragment within my main view. So how to do that? Let's go to the main view, and below this edge box I want to add another VBox. Okay, and inside this I want to add a namespace again, that is Sap Ui5 core. So it looks like go to main view. So this is the namespace I want to add at the top of my file. So this is the namespace I want to add Sap Ui5 core, and this is not giving an error because I have not yet used it. So let's use this one. The embedding syntax is now obviously name is missing. So let's add the name. Name will start with the namespace first. What is the namespace? Namespace is here till this app. So this is my namespace. So put the namespace. So namespace is pointing to web app. So under this web app I have view. So let's dot view, and under that view I have the fragment called address. So this is what I want, right? So save this out. I missed something, not a name. Name is not a property. It's actually called fragment name. Okay. So this is the valid property. So, and the type I'm using is called XML, right? So let's save this. What will happen if everything works fine? I'm supposed to see the address should be appearing over here. Cool. It's all showing well. So address part is now embedded. What is the next part? Next part is obviously the binding, because I want to show certain data. Now binding we can do many ways. The simplest thing, I want to add a model at the component.js kind of a globally, so that it is okay for the demonstration purpose. Either otherwise you can create the local model for the view specific, but I want to do it over here. So I'm now in the component.js. So let's copy this code again, and it's a simple code for the model. So what is showing? It's a new constructor of JSON model, and I have first name, last name, and certain address properties. That's all. Now I'm just adding up this model to the globally called set model and giving a name of the model, but it's complaining because JSON model it doesn't find. So let's add the JSON model. So this is what I want to add it over here at the dependent one. Okay, so this is the JSON model I have added, which I can just add it over here like this. It will create an instance of the JSON model. So you see now the JSON model is available, and I'm creating a new kind of a instance of it and embedding all the values. So if I save it now, because I'm already using the EMP model, so obviously I would be able to see certain data. So let's go back again. It's reloaded automatically, kind of a live reload. Voila, all the fields are coming well, except the first one, the name. So let's fix that also. Now this binding is very important, okay, for UI5 application development, and I have created two videos on that. One is the binding basics, and another is the binding constraints. Both are important. I definitely recommend you to check this out. If you have any doubts, I'm guarantee you it will be all clear. Fine. So this all set. What next? Just save all, because I have changed multiple files. And if I now open the application, I must see it's all shown. Cool. So now let's show this particular address as a pop-up. So I will do this by adding a button. Clicking on that, the pop-up will appear. So what I need to do that, go to main view and add a button after the VBox. It's complaining because the method is not available in the controller of the view. So let's go to the controller. So we have learned the two ways that there to open the fragment, right? So one is the load fragment and another is the fragment.load. So let's start with the first one called load fragment. Okay, so two ways we'll learn. So one is called load fragment. So for that, what we need, and I need one more fragment because the fragment should be used as a dialog, right? So I want to use the address dialog that we have not yet created. We'll create this one. Okay. Okay, so we need one dialog element inside that. Okay, what next? We have to add within this dialog the fragment. So one fragment is embedded into another fragment, right? And type is here the XML. So that is what. So let's go to my controller. And in this controller, this is what we said. So let's save all, because I have just instantiated, but I have not yet opened it. So what will happen is basically returns a promise. Okay, this load fragment returns a promise. So we need to see, like, if this is not instantiated, then instantiate it. Otherwise, so now what will happen? Obviously, I will be able to see something. Let's see what's happening. Click on show address. Nothing is coming. Why? Let's check that, and it's an important point. The point in console, it says there is something called duplicate ID. You probably can see, right? There is a duplicate ID. Why? Because the same fragment already available over here, and the same fragment again I'm loading through this pop-up. So there is a conflict with the IDs. To save this problem, you can just put called ID. Just add an ID, anything. Just I'm adding ID as Somnath, right? And in the dialog of that, I have added something called, let's put my name, Paul. Okay, that will be easy to track for me. So let's save it now. So what will happen? It's coming up now. Clicking on show address, voila. Now it's opening without complaining. So let's see what's happening. Now again, go to inspect. Now in the element, I want to show this little bigger. So let's what I want to do. I want to search for Somnath, right? So that is what the ID I have added. So you see the fragment Somnath 2 dot and then Paul. So that is the ID that been prefixed. Okay. So that is what it's been done. So now to access this particular fragment, right, we have to use this particular ID called Somnath double dash dot Paul. So this is the way we can access this fragment. So why you need to access? Because you need to close this, because there is no close button. For that, we can add this begin button, and there we can add a button, right? The application show address, if I click on that, now the close button is coming. So we have to add the event handler because close doesn't work. So to now add the event handler, we have learned that as we are using the concept called load fragment, so automatically the current controller is, or the view controller is actually linked to this fragment called address dialog. So what the next step, we can just add a new function called, pretty simple, we can just use this dot by id. Okay, and the by id I have to just use called Somnath dot, that is my id, dot close. That's it, simple, right? So this way I can access my fragment and I want to close this. Say, so let's again rerun this application. It's all fine. Click on show address, appearing, close it, gone. So one of the fragment open and close using load fragment we have learned. The show address showing little left, right? Let's little change the look and feel. 1 second. So now it is showing little better, right? Okay. Next is I want to add the same pop-up but with a different approach, and that is called Fragment.load method. So let's add one more button. So copying this, so this is missing, so let's add to the controller. This is show address, so just on top it, so just added this out function, well, just put a comma, right? So that way the show address method we can access it. But what we can do now, we have to just use an API called Fragment, SAPI core embassy fragment, that we need to use it. Now what we can do, we can just first add this API and copy this API and put it under function as an input. And now here we can call this fragment. So what will happen if I now test it? It should work well, right? Nothing much. Let's see what's happening. I would be now expecting 2 buttons. So this is the second approach. Clicking on that, it's working, but where is my data? Data is missing, right? Something wrong. Close, not working, of course. Something wrong. Where is the data? We have learned that we have to explicitly link the behind the view or the owning view under which this pop-up or this fragment is getting loaded. So that is missing. Also, you need to set the controller explicitly, like which controller this close action handler should be written. Let's now do these 2 things, important 2 things. So first of all, I need the view reference. So view reference means this dot get view, but add dependent, right? And this is what is my dependent view. But the problem is inside this promise, this operator is not this operator. Okay, these are different. So for that, there is a very simple way we can. Various people does follow different approach. Someone put that is equal to this. Someone use a jQuery.proxy. But the best way is to bind this. So that way, the outside this actually bind to this particular function, and it will be available over here. I have created one video in the JavaScript fundamental part 1. You can refer that video to learn these concepts. Let's move on. So this dependency is done. So now I believe it should work. And next is the controller. So let's add controller. And controller is this. Okay. The current view controller is my controller. So what will happen if I save it? Is that all fine? Save all. And now open this application. The second page. Yeah, now I'm able to see all the data. Close, still doesn't work. That's okay. So because the close means if I just see the close, what's happening, that's interesting to learn. So let's maximize it. I can drag it. That's true. So click on inspect and see the console log. Let's clean it and let's again click on the close. What is happening? Close, it's complaining that it doesn't know what is the by ID, right? So by ID is missing. So if I move, the moment I click on this, it's complaining in the console. It says that this by ID is undefined, because we know Fragment.load doesn't offer the by ID approach as a cons part. So now what we have to do, we have to just write explicitly this code logic to somewhere else. So let's do this way. This is our close dialog. So let's comment this out first. Okay. And let's take an event that's coming from and put a debugger. Okay. And we'll learn how to get the fragment details. So let's open once again. It's all opening well. Now close still not work. That's fine. Click on inspect. Coming back to the console, click on close. It's coming back to this method called debugger. So here is O event, right? So O event, go to console. If I check O event, what will happen? O event is the event from the press, but I want O event dot get source. Okay, what it returns? It returns the button, means the close button, and the close button is actually residing under the main view, which is the parent, right? So let's hit get parent, and the parent is my ID called Paul. This is my fragment, correct? So now with the parent, if I just run close function, what will happen? Voila, my pop-up gets closed over here. So this is the code that I need to just run from that event handler, and my job is done, right? So just like this, saving it. Let's remove the debugger. No need this debugger. Okay, so now open this one. It's all started. Clicking on the second, close it. Voila, it's working. Now one more thing, and that is I want to switch the controller. The controller, I don't want to put it over here as the same controller, but I want to hook it to a different controller. How to do that? So what I want to create a new controller, or maybe in the model, I want to create a new file called fragment.js, something a file. Okay. This class we need to attach to our controller. How to do that? Over here, we just need to do like the SAP, this namespace we need to hit first. So this is my namespace, but all the dot need to be replaced with the directory things. So /, and then finally this is my web app actually. So now we need to call model, right? And under the model we have something called fragment. So this is the file that we need to link. So this fragment, copy this and put it over here as a small fragment. So it should not be conflicting, because the capital and small should be fine. And so now we can this is our second approach. So instead of controller this, we can link this one. Okay, so now if I comment this and uncomment the other one, so that way two close function we are working. So this is something all added, right? So this is the close dialog for the first approach, and I want to link the second file, which is my fragment.js, for the second approach, right? So let's save this all, and now let's put a breakpoint also. Let's put debugger, okay, so that we get to know if it gets linked to. Now open this application. It should be appearing. Click on this particular function. Now close it. It's working, but it's better to go for an inspect. Click on close. It's coming to this second one. You see, this is the second controller that we have linked to with the fragment.load method, and now it is calling from here, and it's still working. But whereas the first one, if I just open it and click on the close, it is coming to the main controller view, as you can see, and it's working with this by ID approach. Cool, right? So these two things done. Thanks for watching and hope this was helpful to you. We'll soon connect to the new topic of our UI5 learning series. Till then, goodbye.